Hey everyone, welcome to our Savvy Resource webinar. We're so excited to have you guys here. We have an amazing guest that's joining us, Mr. Grant Bennett from People Fund. And today's resource topic is going to be about access to capital for veteran entrepreneurs. So he has some really incredible information to share with you guys. But before we get started, I just wanted to go through a little bit of housekeeping. So for everybody that's joining us on our actual webinar, if you look down below, you'll notice there's a Q&A box. Please feel free throughout the presentation if you have any specific questions. You can certainly plug them in there. We will make sure that we try to get to all of them at the end of the webinar. And anything that we're not able to get to, we will certainly follow up with Grant and get those out to you guys afterwards, along with the recording. So if you're joining us through Facebook Live, welcome. If you guys are happy to join us while we're actually live, not doing a replay, you can definitely enter all of your questions in the comment box below. And if you want to sign up for any future notifications of our webinars, please make sure to go to our website, which you will see in the panel below, www.savvyvets.org/veterans, and that is plural. So without further ado, Grant, please feel free to introduce yourself and give us your presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and try to get the presentation up here and share my screen. Share screen. Bear with me just a second here. And here we are. Perfect. Okay, so what we're going to cover today is going to be access to capital, specifically for veteran entrepreneurs as they are going to start or grow their small business endeavors. So my name is Grant Bennett. I am a 3-year Army veteran and I was in the National Guard for 5 years, and I got out a few years ago and have transitioned into working for nonprofits that focus on small business lending. I've done a number of jobs on the loan side, loan processing, loan closing, underwriting, and so forth. And now I have been promoted to the Director of Veteran Programs and the Project Manager for Veteran LLC, which is a collaborative that focuses on getting access to capital for veteran entrepreneurs. So there's been studies, and there's the biggest things that veteran entrepreneurs have issue with when they're either trying to start or grow their small business is access to capital, access to a professional network, and access to business management skills. And this kind of makes sense if you look at what veterans go through as they transition away from the military. Access to business management skills, there's a lot of knowledge that folks need that is very technical to the business world and to whatever industry that they're going to have their small business in. A lot of the management skills of leadership and some of the other stuff that we equate to the military of having as a strength is great and translates really well, but there's some of the technical and more tactical details in the business world that veterans don't always have access to when they're first getting out of the military, right? So very big and very important issue for veterans. The other one is a professional network. The way I think of it is, as you're leaving the military, you're completely leaving your professional network that you've had for a number of years. Even though it might be dispersed across the entire country, once you kind of transition out of the military, it's like you step off that train and it just keeps going. So it can be a bit daunting, especially if you're moving to a new city or if you're getting into a new industry, back into the civilian world, to kind of build out that professional network, which is extremely important when you're trying to start or grow your small business, right? But really the number one issue is access to capital for veterans. Access to capital is an issue for all entrepreneurs, really. But really for veterans, we see that they, typically they'll apply for loans more and they'll get approved less on a lot of different financial products. So it's really an issue for veterans. And that's what we're going to cover here today, is how to plan and strategically put together an idea to get access to capital to start or grow your small business as a veteran. So access to capital, how do you become, the big part is how do you become bank loan ready, right? And how do you choose responsible sources of capital? This is a big one for me personally, responsible sources of capital. There are a ton of online lenders out there. There's a ton of predatory lenders out there under the mask of online lending. Um, some of the telltale signs of some of this stuff is, daily payments, or not telling you what the interest rate is for your payments, or just saying that you just have to pay them $50 or $200 a day, and they don't frame it in the way that we traditionally think about debt, right? So those are some of the things to look out for when you're talking about responsible sources of capital. Again, as we're trying to put together our financial strategy, we got to keep in mind that money is not the answer to every issue, right? There's other issues that are out there that veterans need to focus on, but then also for small startups, there, being thrifty and bootstrapping a lot of the times can be just as important as getting that bank loan or getting that seed investment. This one's really important. Find an organization that has a network of mentors and advisors to help you along the way. There are a number of veteran service organizations out there that focus on these problems specifically. And obviously, you're in a great place if you're already plugged into the Savvy network here. They can really help you kind of craft some of these, or kind of talk to a lot of these issues that you have, put you in contact with the right folks, and be able to help you out as far as building out your network and your advisors. And then the veteran entrepreneurs need an entire ecosystem of support, right? And there's an entire ecosystem out there. You just got to kind of get plugged into it. I think the biggest thing here is if you're having an issue with something, reach out to somebody, right? Talk to somebody that either has a business background or is plugged into the Savvy network and can really kind of help you out with these issues. But you've got to voice up, because there's resources out there, but there's a lot of them. So sometimes it can be hard to find the great ones that you want to be partnered with. So sources of funding, right? Where is the money? What's it structured like? How do I get in front of it, right? So here's a list of sources of funding. There's a number of them, but the way that I think about this is it comes down really to two buckets, right? I think of it as either a debt investment, right, from what we would think of as like a bank or a lender, and then there's an equity investment, right? The equity investment being, someone buys into the company that you started, and you don't have to pay them back on any certain term, but then they just have ownership in your business, uh, indefinitely unless they sell. So, but it all comes down to those kind of two investments when we're talking about sources of funding. Debt, which will be paid back over time and then they will go away, and then equity, which will be a much more long-term partnership, right? And then alternative financing, there are alternatives to those two kind of traditional models, but really they roll back up to either debt or equity. Personal financing is really important part whenever you're looking to take on either a small business loan or take on an equity investment. You want to make sure that you have your personal finances in order. Now, when it comes to getting capital for your business, there's a couple of ways that you can look at this and try to plan as early as possible. So personal savings obviously is a good one. Personal credit cards is another way that we see a lot of entrepreneurs try to get things up and started, especially in the very, very early stages. When if they've got like one or two credit cards and they've maybe got a $5,000 or $10,000 limit on them, that can be enough capital in some instances to at least get started on stuff. Another source of personal financing is quote unquote loans from friends and family. They it's everyone knows somebody within the family or within their friend circle that they can ask for an investment into their business. I put loans in quotations because in practice, a lot of times this is either it's almost gifted to them, or the terms for the payback or what the structure of the ownership is going to be can be a little fuzzy, right? So friends and family do make a great resource for that initial investment into the business. But whenever you're doing that, I would say make sure that you're having conversation with the friends and family about what the investment is going to look like, what the payback is going to look like over time. you don't really, you want to continue to have those great relationships with friends and family down the line. And you don't want something like an investment in a business to kind of get in the way of that. So have a conversation early with them to set expectations. Finding alternatives to spending money. So this is bootstrapping, this is thrifting this, right? There's a number of ways to go about this. You know, if you want to, if your dream is to have a brick and mortar, uh, a way to not spend all the money or ask for so much money in the beginning is maybe to get a food truck or is maybe to do a food stand and something like that, and really grow that part of the business out before you get, to this big brick and mortar store, or lease equipment or buy equipment used. There's a number of ways to kind of be thrifty in this area. If you're a veteran, if you've been in the military, thrifting is part of it. I mean, that's just part of service. I found that there's always times where you need more than you have, and you just have to figure out a way to deal with less. The same skill that you've developed there in the military really does apply in the entrepreneurship side. You're not going to have unlimited resources. You need to make the best of what you have now, and getting additional capital is not always the solution to that. Some of the personal financing strategies can strain your personal relationships and your credit score, right? Especially whenever you a little further down the road, as you're having success, the business is growing, and maybe you want to have a more traditional small business loan or a more traditional business credit card, some of these other things. And then the lender is going to go back and look at your credit history. If they're going to see you've got maxed out credit cards and all this other stuff, they're not necessarily going to dive into the story and be like, oh, to try and understand that you're trying to get the business started on the personal side. All they're going to see is you have maxed out credit cards, maybe you missed a payment, maybe something in collections, or there's some issue there. So if this is the strategy you're going to go, understand that it is on the personal side, and so it can be reflected on your credit history moving forward. Okay, so equity financing, right? Investments into the business. Investors will give you money and receive a percentage of the ownership in the business. There is no specific payback period, but a lot of equity investors, especially sophisticated equity investors, when we think about angel investors or venture capitalists, people like that, they have very high expectations for their investment, right? So let's say on a grand scale, you might get $500,000, right, from an equity investor. And to them, if you don't return 5x, 10x, 20x of that $500,000 investment, it's not really a win for them, right? That's their base expectation. So a lot of these folks are really expecting big returns on their money. They'll give you a longer time horizon, right? They might think of the investment in terms of 5 years or 10 years. But when at the end of that investment, really they're going to want a huge return on the capital that they've invested. You are going to have people outside the business brought into the business, right? A lot of this can be you're giving up influence, in other words, right? You're bringing on another person that's going to have a voice in the decisions that get made in the business. For better or worse, it cuts both ways. If you bring someone in and they're maybe not that sophisticated of an investor, but they might have all these grand ideas for what they want you to do with your business. You basically just taken that person's money and you brought their opinion along with them, right? The other side of that is sophisticated investors really can have a great mentor or a great professional network that you can eventually or immediately tap into, right? They're going to want to see the business succeed, so they're going to give you access to their network to make sure that their investment grows over time. So it can go both ways, but equity investors can be a great professional network resource. These types of businesses are typically better for businesses that are going to have high growth, right? They're gonna double in size every year. They're gonna double in size, every 6 months or something like that. Because if you look at it, the investor is going to want to have a high return on their money. And if the business is just doing like $1,000 in profit a month, well, they're never really going to recover whatever that investment is. They might, but it might take them 10, 15 years before they ever get a return. So they're really going to want to see that the business is growing at a pretty high rate, so that in the future they'll be able to cash out of their investment at a much higher rate. So typically, equity investors, they're going to be angel investors. They might offer things like convertible notes. You might have venture capitalists. There's this thing called venture debt out there. There's private equity, and then the big kind of equity financing goal is the IPO, the initial public offering, right, where you can list your company on the public markets, and then anyone is able to invest in it. And the liquidity that comes from that is kind of the entrepreneur's dream for a lot of folks. So uh, I do just want to cover on, with angel investing, there's a lot of networks out there that are local to whatever area that you're in. And usually these folks are really good kind of early believers in your business, right? Angel investors are usually entrepreneurs or typically entrepreneurs. They've had success within the business world, and then they're looking to give back to the entrepreneur community, both in terms of a small investment into the company, but then also in giving mentorship and providing a professional network for an entrepreneur to help kind of facilitate and grow the small business. So angel investors are a big deal as far in the early stages, as far as a good plus to kind of bring them into your business. Once you get to the level of venture capitalists or private equity firm, you're really dealing with sophisticated investors that do this full time. And both of those groups, they are working for really large institutions. So they have to be really good, really sharp, and really have an attention to detail whenever they're making their investments. And if they do make their investments, they're going to try to take as any advantage that they can on all of their deals because they're being beholden to their investors as well. So at that level, you've really got to be sharp. You've really got to work with your business team at that point to make sure that the investment is good for everyone involved. Some of the pros and cons of equity investment business. The pro is, like I mentioned, you get access to a business network and an expertise from your equity investor, and it allows your business to grow at a high rate. There's nothing worse than having a business that's really just taking off, but you don't have the cash flow to sustain that growth. So you've got a winner of a business, but you run out of cash, which is the lifeblood of any business, and you're not able to sustain that momentum going forward. And who knows if you'll ever get it back. With an equity investor, they're able to give you that cash right in the moment, right? Without any expectation of being paid back, except for years down the road. You don't have to worry about having to pay a monthly payment next month and another one the following month, right? All their cash that they give you, you can put right into the business and continue to fuel that growth, right? Some of the drawbacks of an equity investor, though, is it is going to be dilutive to your business. And what I mean by that is you'll go from owning, let's say, 100% of the business to maybe 80% of the business or 50% of the business. If it really takes off and you've got a really large business, you might only have 20% of the business or less, right? So it's something that I think folks should think about, especially if they're bringing on a number of equity partners, is to understand that with every person they bring on to the business as an owner, their control, their stake in that business is going to be less and less. It's not a bad thing, right? I think the example that people always think of is do you want to have 100% of $100,000, or do you want to have 50% of $100 million, right? So it can be good as long as the equity investors are helping you grow your business. But it can, over time, you can start to get less and less control of the business that you've started, right? And the last thing on the con list is the outside pressure for growth and profit, right? So if you're bringing on some really sophisticated investor, if you're bringing on a venture capitalist who's going to invest in your business, they're going to have a growth projection and they're going to have a profit projection that they're going to put on you as the entrepreneur, right? You no longer are creating your own growth and profit margins. They're going to be provided to you by these investors who want to have a certain growth target and want to have a certain return at a certain point of time so that they can go back and pay their investors, right? So at that point, you're really you're starting to get outside influence on the business that's not always in the same direction that you're trying to go as the founding entrepreneur. So the next source of capital is traditional debt financing, right? This is when we think of like traditional banks that are doing small business loans or just business loans in general. Um, you want a line of credit or you want to buy a piece of equipment or you're trying to get started and you're going to take X amount of dollars and then you're going to pay it back with the principal and a little bit of interest over, let's say, 5 years to 7 years, right? Usually the way this works is banks want to see how you perform, right? So the equity investor is looking how you're going to do in the future. A banker is usually going to look at how you've been doing in the past, right? So they're going to look at the cash flow that you've been having. They're going to compare it to what the monthly payment is for the amount of money that you're asking for. And depending on what that ratio is, will be whether they decide to give you the loan or not, right? So they always want to see that you're going to have at least for every dollar of debt that they're going to give you, they want to see that you're making at least a dollar, usually a dollar plus of profit that you're going to be able to pay them back over time. Banks are always going to be looking for collateral as well. So if, let's say you get a loan for $100,000 and you're going to buy equipment that's worth $80,000 and you already have equipment that's worth, let's say, $200,000, they're going to want you to pledge all of that to the bank. So if something ever goes wrong, they'll be able to go and take that and sell those assets so they get all of their money back, right? Personal and business credit is a big thing for debt financing, right? They're gonna, if you're an established business, they're gonna see what your business credit history is, and then they're also usually gonna do it on the personal side as well. They're gonna make sure that that those two match as far as the business and you personally have solid credit and have had solid credit for years in the past. Traditional debt finance, they're also going to ask for a commitment or what's called skin in the game, right? Usually, if let's say to start a new business, you think it's going to cost you $150,000, and so you go to the bank and you say, "Hey, this new business is going to cost me $150,000 to get started." The bank typically is not going to give you a loan for $150,000. They're going to want to see you have some kind of investment into the business as well. So they might look to do a loan of $115,000, $120,000, and then expect you to come in with the other part of it so that you're also invested in the project. The bank doesn't want to be 100% accountable for the business getting started. And the owner, if something goes wrong, they can just walk away from it. They want to see that they're also investing in it with the banker, right? Another characteristic is character itself. This one is kind of bothersome for folks. When you look at the five C's of credit, the character one can be kind of ephemeral, if you will. It's like a soft target that you can kind of mold to be to mean whatever you want it to mean. But from our perspective, and from what I see with working with veterans, the biggest kind of plus on the character side is going to be honorable service, right? If I see a veteran that has a DD 214 with and saying that they've been honorably discharged, that's like a huge plus for me in the character bubble. So there are ways that you can kind of firm up this character requirement. And then the last thing that bankers are going to be looking for is good, steady growth in the business. This is a little hard to believe for some people, but if some traditional lenders, if they see too much growth, it might give them cause for concern or make them pause because if they're going to give you a loan and you're going to continue to grow, well then that growth means that you're not going to have the cash to pay them back. So they're going to want to see very very steady growth over time, 5%, 10%, maybe 15 or 20%. But if you start, doubling every 2 years or something like that, from their perspective, which is risk averse, they're going to say, "Oh, is this person going to have enough cash 2 years from now to be able to pay me back, or are they going to have to go and raise additional money to just be able to pay me back over time?" So they want to see good, steady performance in the past, and they want to see good, steady growth within the business for the future. Again, some of the pros and cons. The pro of debt financing is it can grow the company pretty fast, especially if you've gotten to a point where you've started the business, you've gotten to a point in you know you've maxed out the capacity of some of your equipment, or you've maxed out the capacity of the space of your restaurant, or whatever the deal is. you're able to grow the company faster by getting a loan, right, and getting access to cash now to grow the business, compared to having to save up all the profits over several years to then be able to finance some of that growth. It provides liquidity in the moment. It allows you to purchase assets, and it allows you working capital for operating expenses, right? So let's say you're trying to grow your company faster and you want to hire 2 more employees. Well, you're able to get debt financing so that you can hire those employees now and then be able to pay them over time as they generate money for your business, and then be able to pay back the lender. Another big pro of lending debt is it's non-dilutive, right? So let's say the terms are you pay the lender back over 5 years. At the end of that 5 years, you, the business owner, and the banker go your separate ways, right? They got the return on their money. They got paid back whole. You were able to grow your business, and that's the end of the relationship. So there is none of this owner or this person that's in the business for the life of the business until they're ready to sell it, right? Some of the drawbacks of traditional debt is going to be that the lenders typically are risk averse, right? They're gonna again want to see steady growth in the past. They're going to want to see projected steady growth in the future. They usually avoid startups again because they can't see steady growth in the past. They don't know how it's going to perform in the future, and so they usually just avoid startups altogether. And then it's going to limit your options as far as cash flow and some of the things that lenders will require. So it's hard to pivot your business's revenue model if you've got a lot of debt within the company, because every month you're going to have to consistently pay back this principal and interest payment, right? So you can't really have a period where you're going to pivot the company to focus on this to get your revenue, and maybe it's going to take a couple of months for the income to start being generated and all that stuff. Well, in that couple of months, you've still got to pay back that banker on a monthly basis, right? And so it's restricting the business about what it can do and respond to the market. And again, some of the covenants, some of the things that they require is, maybe one of the things that they'll say, hey, we'll give you this loan, but you've got to have $20,000 in cash in an account that we control at all times, right? And if you break that covenant, if for some reason you have to go use that cash that's just sitting there, right? It can be cause for concern, and they can actually, in the worst case scenario, they can say, hey, pay us back all that money because you've broken one of these things that we've agreed to. So they can be very limiting as far as what you're able to do with the business during that time that you have the small business loan. Okay, so some of the alternative sources for financing, there's a number of them, especially with technology and the internet, the way everything's been going here in the past few years. There's a lot of alternative financing out there. Some of them very good. Some of them can put entrepreneurs at a lot of risk and really kind of constrict what they're able to do with their small business. The first kind of alternative financing is the one that I have a lot of experience with. Community development financial institutions. These are basically nonprofits that are lenders, right? So they're not profit driven, but they're more community driven, right? So they really target on people that banks usually skip over or have skipped over historically. And so what that looks like is people that live in low to moderate income areas. They focus on minorities. They'll focus also on startup loans. There's a number of them that will focus on veteran entrepreneurs as well. They follow the same framework as a bank, but have less stringent criteria. So they're still going to look at cash flow. They're still going to look at personal credit, but they're just not going to be as strict on the requirements for some of that. For an example, a lot of banks, if you have a credit score of less than 700, then they're going to automatically say no to you, right? But with some of the CDFIs and some of the other alternative financiers, they might not have 650 might be okay, or 620, or they might not care what it is at all, as long as you don't have anything in collection. So there are alternatives out there. A lot of them will do startup loans, and then from there you can go on to online lenders. Online lenders also some will do startup loans as well. the big thing with online lending is the ease of access to the capital. So, they're using these algorithms to underwrite loans. You just give them a little bit of information, you give them some of your bank statements, and they can analyze and make a decision of whether to give you money or not pretty quickly. With that ease of access usually comes a cost in the um, in the form of an interest rate that's typically higher than what you would be able to get from, let's say, a traditional bank or someone else, right? You're going to have to pay that. That convenience is going to be something that you pay for over the life of the loan with a higher interest rate. They can, but again, they can give you quick money, and some of them will have weird terms, like we were talking about earlier, to where they're going to be able to go into your bank account and take out, let's say, 15% of your sales each day. So regardless of whether you made a profit or not, they're gonna take the money out on a daily basis. That's based on either a percentage or just like a threshold of usually what they set it to be. And regardless of how the business performs, they're going to make sure that they're getting their money back on a daily basis. The website nerdwallet.com is a great resource to, first off, explore a lot of the alternative financing offerings. They also have a lot of stuff on the personal credit side, the personal financing side, a lot of great articles that you can explore and try to, suss out who are the good actors, who are the bad actors in this alternative financing space. Crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, these are kind of the same idea. I think the big takeaway here, though, is you're able to raise capital from a lot of different people. You're able to kind of leverage the network that is available on the internet to reach a lot of people and get a little bit of money from each of them, but aggregate, the investment can be quite large. And these are actually really interesting. They're becoming more and more sophisticated over the years, to where you're not having to deal with all the individual investors on a one-on-one basis. They kind of lump them together, and you're still able to get the access to capital as an entrepreneur. So this is a really good source. You're seeing a lot of like really high-tech companies start to use some of these as an alternative to the angel investor venture capital side of things. And then disaggregated funders, which is kind of the same as the crowdfunding. The one issue that I find with crowdfunding is that you do need a crowd, right? And what I mean by that is on a lot of these sites, you've got to have really, really slick marketing. You've got to have usually a video that tells you about the business and the product that can cost two, three, four. You've got to have a really good business plan together. Your management team has to look really good on paper. Like you've got to have a lot of things polished before you're going to get a lot of people to buy into your business idea. So especially in the startup phase, a lot of it can be just about attracting people that you want to get invested into your business rather than executing on the business itself. So just to dive into CDFI's community development financial institutions a little bit more. They're an interesting kind of setup of nonprofits. They're designated by the U.S. Treasury Department to make sure that they are targeting underserved populations and giving them the access to capital that traditional lenders have been leaving off their portfolios for a number of years. So low-income sisters tracts and also with the minorities. And then, so what we're trying to do at People Fund, and then also with the Veteran LLC Collaborative, is focus on some of the policy work that veterans to solve some of the issues that veteran entrepreneurs are facing as it involves access to capital. And one of those is to have them recognized by the Treasury Department as a targeted populations that the CDFIs are all able to get credit for serving. There's, hundreds of loan funds out there. Loan funds are actually the most popular thing. So people that are trying to start or grow their small businesses, that's the most frequent things that CDFIs do. Allow them to do it really well. They focus on startups. They focus on people that are, trying to grow. Maybe they're trying to get a $10,000 loan, or they're trying to get a $500,000 loan. CDFIs are really good at being able to offer to both of those businesses. There's a lot of banks out there that are CDFIs as well. And so, people they'll go into the low to moderate income areas that other banks won't, and they'll provide those banking services both on the personal and on the business side. And then the credit unions as well act very similar to the banks in that they function and charter themselves as members of the community that their depositors have ownership in. So a lot of good stuff on the CDFI. So with the overview of the loan process, the big thing with CDFIs or really any lender is putting together your loan package, right? So there's always a loan application. Typically, some of the things that they're going to look for is it's going to be a business plan, and with that business plan is going to be projections for 3 years. They're also going to look at your personal credit side, especially if you're a startup and you don't have business credit for them to look at. Personal credit is going to be even more important. And I think the big thing here to focus on is not necessarily the score, but focus on not having anything that's showing up that's been past due in the past, let's say 12 months, not having anything being charged off and in collections. And even if there is something in collections, make sure that you're proactive in working with whoever that collector is to get some kind of payment plan. Because especially with community lenders like CDFIs, they'll understand if something's been charged off as long as you're working with that person, right? So personal credit is really important. They're usually going to have you provide a personal financial statement so that they understand what your personal expenses are, what your personal income is going to be. And typically, they're going to ask you to personally guarantee whatever the loan is that you're getting for the small business. Depending on whether you started the business or not, they're going to ask for tax returns from yourself and then also from the business. And it's typically 2 to 3 years that they're going to look at to make sure that what you're saying on the personal financial statement, what you're saying in your income statement, matches what you're telling the government. Another big one is use of funds. So if you're asking for $100,000, you really want to be clear what it is that you're going to use that $100,000 is. So when I was an underwriter, right, I would have people show me, shopping carts from Amazon or provide me with, statements from auto dealers or whatever it is, showing me that, okay, you're asking for this amount, this is how much it says it is, and that they match up, right? Some of the softer things, like you're going to have to project maybe what your rent is going to be for your business, or you might have to project about how much you're going to pay employees and stuff like that. But you really want to be granular and have a great plan, both for yourself, but then also for the investor, for the lender, as to understand what you're going to use the funds for to start or grow your business. Collateral list. This one, if you're getting a small business loan and it's to buy pieces of equipment, that can be used as collateral for the business loan. If your business already has a number of assets that are worth a lot of money or worth any money, that can be used as collateral for any kind of business loan. But then also some of the on the personal side, you can pledge personal pieces or personal assets to the business loan as well. This typically is cars, especially for us in Texas. We have the homestead exemption, so you can't pledge your homestead as collateral for any business loan. It varies across states, but typically for us, what I see a lot is cars, boats, portfolios, stuff like that that is owned by you personally, but you can pledge it to the small business loan. And then really the big one for a lot of folks is owner's equity injection, right? And this is what we were talking about earlier when I said that the lender is not going to want to do 100% of what the project is. If it's going to cost you $150,000 to get this small business started, they're going to want to see you bring some of the cash to the table as well. And the way that this can work out is it can be just cash. So typically what we see is folks have, they've saved $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever it is, in their personal bank account, and then they're able to pledge that to get a small business loan, right? So that's where owner equity injection can come from. It can also come from money that you've already spent to get the business started, or that you've already put in the business already. So one that I always think about is if you paid, let's say in Texas, it's $300 to register for your LLC license, right? So that $300 to me, with the CDFI and a lot of other folks, that's considered to be an equity injection, right? So we like to count that stuff towards equity injection. If you've already bought $1,000 piece of equipment, that will count towards your equity injection as well. And then we can marry those things with the cash that you might have on hand. Or if you get a gift of cash from someone else, um, we can count all that stuff for equity injection. But typically, it's going to be savings that the entrepreneur has sitting in their account or sitting in an investment account. Oh, here we go. So if you are going to go the route, if you're looking to talk with a small business lender, traditional lender, or a CDFI, really anyone that's going to give you a loan, these are some of the issues that we see out there, and these are some of the questions that you should ask to come across as, pun intended, as a savvy borrower when you're talking to your bankers. So is there a penalty for early payment? You'll see this sometimes with people with lenders that are less than savory. They're trying to make sure that they're gonna rope you into a high interest loan, and then they're gonna penalize you heavily if you try to get out of it and refinance it early, right? So make sure that you understand from the beginning. If you get to a position as a borrower to pay that loan off early and save yourself the interest expense, can you do that? Will your lender allow you to do that? Also understand with the interest rate, is it fixed or is it flex or is it variable, right? If it's a fixed rate, whatever they say it's going to be at closing is what it's going to be for the entire life of the loan. But there are a lot of other lenders out there who make it variable. So let's say it's 5.5% when you close, and then the prime rate goes up 1/4 of a point. Is that going to affect your cash flow? Are you aware of that? Are you going to be able to plan for that in the future? So that, if prime goes up, a 0.5 percentage point and your payment goes up, let's say $300, right, out of nowhere, you weren't expecting it, that you're in a place as a business owner that's not going to throw you off. So make sure you understand whether your interest rate is fixed or variable. A lot of lenders are going to make sure that you have some type of insurance on your business, whether it's for the business itself, whether it's for you, the business owner, right? Like a lot of lenders want the owners to have life insurance out on them that goes to the bank if something were to happen to the owner, right? So a lot of banks have a lot of what seems very strange insurance requirements. They want to make sure if you're in a flood zone or not, so that if the property gets flooded and the equipment gets ruined, that the flood insurance goes to the bank, right, instead of to you, the entrepreneur. So there's a lot of requirements out there that seem strange, especially for first-time entrepreneurs. So that's a really interesting question to ask your banker to make sure that you're understanding what the impact of getting that loan is going to be. Service fees, some folks will again try to get revenue from a number of different places. So they might say that, hey, we'll give you this small business loan at 7%, but then they don't tell you that there's a 1%, 2%, whatever percent service fee that you have to pay each month. So that monthly payment that looked like X is really X plus, $200. How much are the closing costs? This is another big one. First off, as a veteran-owned small business, as a veteran borrower, I would be looking for lenders that have some kind of preferential closing costs for veterans. Like a lot of lenders will waive or offer fee reduction for veterans. So that's something that you can talk with and try to do your research on if you're trying to get a loan. Look for people that offer fee reduction for veteran entrepreneurs. But either way, you want to understand what the costs are going to be up front so that when you get through the approval and you go to close the loan and you're ready to get the cash and get started with your business, they say, hey, you owe us $5,000 in closing costs, and it completely catches you off guard. And then this one's really important, especially as you're getting started, right? Especially if you're going to work with some of the alternative lenders like CDFIs, is what is the post-loan support that they're going to be able to provide for such as business training, education, workshops, and networking, right? What else do they have to offer you to make sure that you're going to be successful as a veteran entrepreneur? Some banks will not offer anything. Some will offer, things that are exclusive to their customers, and others will partner with other organizations outside of just outside of their company to bring in outside folks, outside experts to make sure that their entrepreneurs are able to grow and sustain their small businesses over time so that they're more successful. And with that, banks, lenders have seen a lot of success with if they're providing some of these other services, it keeps their loans good and keeps them from going bad. And it kind of builds an ecosystem of success for their borrowers and for their additional partners. So that's a really important one to think about, again, way before you're actually going to apply for the loan. Okay, so how are we going to pull all this together, right? How are we going to figure out what path is best for you as a veteran entrepreneur to get access to capital? What source of capital is going to be best for you, right? Is it going to be a small business loan? Is it going to be an equity investor? How do we figure that out and try to put together a plan to start talking with some of these folks and get started? So personal finances, right? This is kind of the core of it. This is the base level of it. What is your personal cash flow, right? Look like? What does your credit report look like? How much assets do you have compared to how much collateral you have on the personal side, right? If you personally have a lot of personal debt that's going to take up all of your cash flow and your revenue, you might want to pay some of that stuff off so that you have more free cash flow moving forward. You have less money that's tied to debt payments that are going out each month, right? Before you start to focus on trying to start a small business, right? Get the personal side in order first. Once you get to a good place from there, then you can start to leverage yourself out and start the small business. You want to really understand what your business model is and what it's going to be like in the beginning and what you think it's going to be like in the future. Again, this goes back to what we were talking about when you're trying to decide what type of investor you want to bring on with your business. Do you want to bring on the lender who's only going to be there for a number of years, but you're not going to have that flexibility maybe? Or are you going to want to have the equity partner who's going to be able to really fuel the growth that you're having as a small bit, or as you're having getting started, but might have their own agenda that is different from yours, that they're going to have you, they're going to make sure that is getting incorporated in the business, right? Losing some of that control. Determine the use of funds, right? Figure out how much it is you're going to need, and then figure out how it is you're going to use that capital efficiently so that you're able to get the business started, to get the business to that next kind of growth performance platform, so that you're able to continue to succeed and the access to capital doesn't become a burden to you, but like it becomes a vehicle for growth. You also want to decide, the mix of between debt and equity, right? Just because there are these two buckets doesn't mean you can't use both of them at the same time. So you want to make sure that if let's say long term you're going to need you you know let's say $2 million worth of equipment. So you might be able to go with a debt partner and they'll fund $1 million of it, and you go to the equity partner and they'll fund the rest of that the $1 million. You're able to get started, but you're able to blend the two together so that you're able to be successful in the future. And then this is a big one: periodically monitor and manage your financial plan, right? So these are things that you want to visit on a pretty regular basis moving forward, so that you can tweak and adjust some of the things that you're seeing in the business as it's performing on a day-to-day basis, and how you can better manage your financial plan, right? So if you have a small business loan and it's say at 12%, at what point does it make sense for you to find someone else that can refinance it at 5%, right? And save yourself the cash flow, and use that extra money to continue to grow the business, right? With the refinance, it's super easy. You just go from a higher interest rate to a lower interest rate. You're basically just freeing up cash that you can use in the business. But at what point should you do that? When can you find the small business lender that has a smaller discount? Are they do they actually offer a smaller interest rate, or is it tied together with service fees and all this other stuff that people try to hide in there, right? So periodically go back and review what it is that you've done, the first principles that got you to where you are now, and make sure that those still align with what your goals are for the business going forward. Okay, and then lastly, this is the contact us page for savvy vets. the physical address, the telephone number. I swear they both work. The email works as well. Definitely check out the social media and make sure that you're joining those. And yeah, with that, Adrian, thank you so much.
Thank you, Grant. Definitely appreciate it. That was some really incredible information. So we have some questions. So let me know. Are you ready?
Yeah, as long as they're not too hard. The easy ones.
Okay. No, and of course, any of the ones that we don't get to, like I mentioned before, we will absolutely make sure that we follow up and pick Grant's brain a little bit more and get that out to everybody that's registered for the webinar. So if you're on live, don't forget to contact us if you want to get responses to that. So first question, how much does the Y contribute to a approval? I'm assuming maybe for a loan? Like why you need the money, like what you're using the money for, I'm assuming is what they mean.
Oh, it can, yeah, and especially for a small business loan, it can be very important, right? So, and there's a couple of different ways to look at this. The first is the industry. A lot of lenders don't want to lend to certain industries. So let's say you're a sophisticated investor and you want to get a loan for $50,000, and you're going to take that $50,000 and you're going to invest it into the stock market, and you're going to get a return back of 500%. You'll easily be able to cover that whatever piddly P&I payment is on a monthly basis, and you're going to be a millionaire in no time. Lenders, they're going to say, no, we're not. That's not something that's speculative to us. That's not something we're going to do. Another thing to look at from that, from an industry perspective, is a lot of industries will do what we think of as a double X, but they won't do triple X, right? So like they'll do alcohol, but they're not going to do, a strip club or something like that, right? So it really is important. And then, the industry is important, but then what the use is. They're not going to want to just give you $100,000 for operating expenses, right? They're going to want to see, what the operating expenses are. Do you have hard costs for what it is? Are you projecting? What are you basing your projections on? It really is important, and it's one of those things that I try to spend a lot of time on talking with veteran entrepreneurs. Is just walking through them, helping walk through that process of putting together a really strong use of funds.
Perfect, thank you. The next question that I have is, government contracts sometimes need immediate funding. Is there a fast track or expedited program for things like that?
So from our perspective, there's not really, we don't do a lot of government contracting. What is important to think about there, though, is there are a lot of lenders and there are a lot of investors around kind of the DC area and some of the bigger metro areas that do focus a lot. They have either loan products or the entire companies focus on supporting government contracts. That is one thing that is, it can be difficult to get access to as well. But I think my advice would be to reach out to your network within kind of that community and see how other folks are financing some of that stuff, because it can be hard. It's a big win if you get a contract, especially if it's your first contract, but then you need $100,000 within a week to even get started before you get paid, whatever, 30, 40 days down the road. So it can be difficult, but yeah, I would ask other folks how they're doing it and what they would suggest. That's not a great answer, but it's the best
I got. I appreciate it. All right, we're going to take one last question. Is there some kind of survey or test to help me figure out which of the financing options I should take?
Great question. So we've actually thought about how to develop this and put it on our website to try and help you figure out what is best. I think really what's going to help you out the most, though, as you're getting started, is to talk with your network of professionals. Reach out to the folks at Savvy. They'll put you in contact. They can put you in contact with me. I would love to talk through this, but if you're going to do it on your own, I think the thing to think about is how much money are you going to ask, and then how are you going to pay back whoever the investor is. So if it's a bank, how are you going to generate enough cash immediately to pay them back on a monthly basis? And if it's an equity investor, how are you going to pay them back over time, and make it rewarding for them to where they'll consider it to be a successful investment, right?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Grant. And if you're comfortable, where can people find you?
Sure. So definitely reach out to me. It's my email address is Grant, GRANT, at peoplefund, PEOPLEFUND.org. I would love to talk to any of you and all of you about some of your financing questions as you're moving forward. We do a lot of business one-on-one, and then we also put folks in touch with some of our other resources if we don't have the specific answer. So I'd love to talk to each one of you. We'll set something up through email and
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure having you, Grant. And again, you guys can definitely reference this at any point. We are streaming this live on Facebook, so if you are joining us afterwards, please feel free to rewind, share, and you can post your comments below. We'll make sure that we follow up with all of the questions and again, get some great information from Grant. Everybody that joined, we definitely appreciate having you on. Any of the questions that we weren't able to get to, we will send to you with an answer via email with the recording for this webinar. So thank you again for joining us. If you want to be notified for future webinars, www.savvyvet.org/veterans. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their day and evening, and thank you so much again for joining. Have a good one. Thanks, Grant.